Andy, I know you've never been happier than when you're sitting by a warm fire, snuggled up in a flannel and basking in the glow of an old-school budget spreadsheet.
It is a special day I can shut down the world for a little me time.
In a world full of applications, why do these antiquated documents and spreadsheets still run the world? And why haven't they been updated in over 50 years? That's why we want to talk about Coda.
Coda is a new kind of doc that brings words, data, and teams together. It comes with a set of building blocks that anyone can combine to create a doc as powerful as an app.
Coda runs our entire business here at True Story FM, from show scheduling across dozens of podcasts and scripts for thousands of episodes, to budgets and plans and wikis and more.
Coda lets us see our business in a new light. If you'd like to shine a light on productivity in your business and save money along the way, check out Coda today at thenextreel.com/Coda. It's hard to believe that we've been having in-depth weekly conversations about movies since 2011.
So many great conversations over the years about so many great movies. All that said, producing this show week after week requires a ton of work behind the scenes.
Becoming a Next Reel member gives you access to all sorts of additional and exclusive content. Plus, you're helping us keep the lights on. Just head to thenextreel.com/membership, where you can learn more about becoming a member, which costs a measly $5 a month, practically the same as one fancy coffee drink. And you get so much more.
Every month, we record a bonus episode exclusively for members. Those episodes cover movies from whatever series we're covering at the moment, or add to previous series.
Some movies we've covered that only members get to hear us discuss include The Blues Brothers,
The Russia House,
Naked Lunch,
Independence Day,
The Hot Rock,
and Relic, the better one. Plus, members get to vote on what we're going to discuss for those episodes.
We also record additional pre- and post-show content in regular episodes that only members get to hear,
like conversations about similarly themed movies.
And answering listener questions from our live member chat.
Speaking of our live member chat, we record almost all of our episodes in Discord, where members can chat right along with us live.
Members get access to other members-only channels in our Discord community as well. On top of all that, members get all episodes a full week earlier than everyone else in a private Next Reel feed just for them that includes all the shows in the Next Reel family. The Next Reel, the Film Board,
movies we like, Sitting in the Dark, and more new projects on the way.
To top it all off, members don't have to listen to ads. We've already eliminated those annoying, dynamically inserted ads that, let's face it, we all hated.
We are listening to you.
We love podcasting for a living, and those ads help to pay the bills. Now, we're counting on you, dear listener.
We promise we aren't going back to those terrible, dynamically inserted ads that don't relate to us at all. All we ask is that you consider supporting the Next Reel family of podcasts with a membership.
Again, it's $5 per month or $55 per year. Just head to thenextreel.com/membership.
thenextreel.com/membership. Get your access to early, ad-free episodes with bonus content, member bonus episodes, and access to member channels and live streams in Discord by signing up today.
Welcome to Silver Linings, part of the Next Reel family of film podcasts on True Story FM. Have you ever liked or even loved a movie that everyone else just seems to hate? Well, you are not alone, my friend. We look at movies that are often panned by critics and audiences to see if their hate is warranted. Sure, we'll talk about what might be broken, but more important, we talk about what really works in these films, with the hope that we change some minds along the way. Perhaps even yours? So, sit back, relax, and let's take the guilt out of guilty pleasures. This is Silver Linings. Hello, I'm Ray, your eternal optimist.
And I'm Ocean. For this episode of Silver Linings, we'll be taking a look at 2010's The Wolfman.
It was 25 years ago that my father found him. He was torn to pieces and half-eaten, Whatever did it was big, and buckshot couldn't kill it. After that, my father went home and cast silver bullets. Wouldn't leave the house on a full moon from then on.
All right, The Wolfman. I don't know if you know this, Ocean, but I am a huge, huge fan of Universal monster movies. Particularly,
Wow, you've been keeping that a secret all this time.
I know.
Yeah.
Nobody
Way to
knows.
come out of the closet. Yeah.
So I might be slightly biased. I'll try not to be when it comes to this film. But since this is a remake, I thought that it would be prudent to just real quick give a brief synopsis of the original 1941 film and also a synopsis of the one that we'll be talking about today, just so
Yeah, please do.
if you haven't seen the original film or if it's been a while, you have a little bit of a refresher. So in the original 1941, The Wolfman, the first big difference is that it takes place in present day for that time. And after learning of the death of his brother, Larry Talbot, or Lawrence Talbot, returns to his ancestral home in Wales, and he tries to reconcile with his estranged father, Sir John Talbot, who is played in the old film by Claude Rains. And while he's there, Larry becomes interested in this local girl named Gwen Conliffe, who runs an antique shop. And to sort of get to know her, he goes in with the pretext that he's going to buy this silver-headed walking stick with a wolf on it. And she tells him that it represents a werewolf, and they define a werewolf as a man who changes into a wolf, quote, at certain times of the year. And as a matter of fact, several times throughout the film, you hear the poem recited, even a man who is pure in heart and says his prayers by night may become a wolf when the wolfbane blooms and the autumn moon is bright.
So that is still with full moons in the original, or do they not reference
It was not confined to full moons.
Okay.
So that night, Larry, Gwen, and Gwen's friend Jenny go to visit a gypsy campsite to get their fortunes told, and there is a sudden wolf attack on Gwen's friend Jenny. Larry ends up killing the beast with his walking stick with the silver head on it, but he is bitten on the chest in the process. And a gypsy fortune teller named Maleva reveals that the animal that bit him was actually her son Bela in the form of a wolf. And she also reveals that since Larry was bitten by a werewolf, he will in turn become a werewolf. And so Larry transforms into a werewolf. He kills a local grave digger, and he wakes up the next morning. He doesn't quite remember things. And finally, he comes to the realization that he has to overcome this condition or be killed. And he is bludgeoned to death in the end by his father.
Spoilers.
With his own silver walking stick. As he's about to attack Gwen, his father kills him with his silver walking stick. And the silver walking stick, I just want to talk about this real quick, is one of my favorite movie props of all time.
Really? Why is that?
Just because it's just such a neat thing to look at. It's so integral to the plot, specifically in the original. It is in this one too, just not quite as much.
Does it have a wolf's head like this one?
It does. They look very similar. The design is very similar. The big difference is that in the original, it's not also a sword or a dagger.
Okay.
It's just a
walking
It's just a
stick and
cane.
nothing else.
Yeah.
Okay.
So then in this film, it takes place in the Victorian era in 1891 in Blackmore, England. And the story starts off very much the same. We have Lawrence Talbot, who's never called Larry, because this is 1891. Lawrence Talbot comes back to his ancestral home after his brother's fiance asks him to come, saying that his brother Ben has died. And his brother Ben was attacked by a werewolf, we come to find out. And so...
Which they don't know at first.
They don't know that at first.
Yes.
But that opening scene in the 2010 film where we see him get killed. Such a big difference there in
visual effects and everything from the original.
Not just visual effects, but just in setting up the story.
Okay.
But anyway, so the story is very much the same in many ways. The one big difference here is that Lawrence's mother is given some attention in that she had committed suicide 25 years earlier when Lawrence was a child, and Lawrence wound up spending some time in a mental hospital or an asylum because he was suffering from delusions, they said, that were connected to the event. Then another huge difference is we find out that the initial werewolf in this movie is Sir John Talbot, Lawrence's father, and he's the one that killed Ben, the brother, and he's the one that bites Lawrence, and he's the one that killed the mother 25 years ago. And there's a big showdown in this movie between father and son as werewolves. And in the end, he ends up being killed by Gwen instead of his father. And
that's the big differences. Nice. That's a great synopsis for any of our listeners. If you were looking to not get spoiled, this is not the show for you.
Right.
So yes. So, but yeah, no, I think that's a great synopsis of the two different movies and where they are different, and they're only different in a few places, right? The overarching theme is similar, and those few changes, which we'll definitely discuss more, those few changes do make a difference in the movie, and I think for the better.
Yeah.
How were you personally introduced to the film?
I was personally introduced to this film I was always a bit bitter toward remakes and reboots, specifically reboots of films and franchises that I love and have grown up with. And the Universal monsters are sacred to me. And so I was never really keen to see this one. But after I started to grow out of that phase, I'm like, okay, I got to give this film a shot.
Well, so now you've brought up an interesting question for me. So then if they're sacred to you, which one of the Universal monsters is your favorite?
Frankenstein, bar none.
Okay. All right. Well, I guess we'll have to cover that in a different episode. All right. So back onto the Wolfman.
But yeah, so I wound up watching this and feeling that it really, for a remake, is a good effort on the part of the filmmakers. Thought it was, and we'll get more into that. But how about you? How are you introduced?
So I saw the trailer for this movie when it first came out. It looked very interesting, and it was one of those movies that was on my list of movies to see at the time, and for reasons that I cannot articulate for you now because I don't remember, I just never got around to it. And so seeing this movie, the first time I saw it was in preparation for this podcast.
Well, better late than never, right?
Exactly. Better late than never. And before we talk about what we think about it, why don't we talk about the critical consensus?
Those bastards.
Exactly. Yeah. So those soulless minions that watch these movies. So the Rotten Tomatoes. I always like to start off with the Rotten Tomatoes recap, and the recap of the critical consensus seems to be that this is a suitably grand and special effects laden. The Wolfman suffers from a suspense deficient script and a surprising lack of genuine chills, which sounds bad. And in some of these bad reviews, you had some that were, more well thought out and said, from the Washington Post, where while it's sleeker and more sophisticated than the Chaney version, this new Wolfman isn't any scarier. And then there was some that said, the Wolfman delivers plenty of scares and an abundance of eviscerations, but director Joe Johnston doesn't take the film anywhere unexpected. One of the few good reviews, not few, I guess one of the good reviews was, The Wolfman from Entertainment Weekly. The Wolfman, hokey and uneven though it is, has the kind of authentic emotional hook that too many horror movies today don't have. And another one is from Richard Roper, who said it's exactly what it's supposed to be, an upscale goth B movie with dark humor and buckets of blood. But not to be outdone, the Wall Street Journal said it is a film that begins with an eerie gothic mist of suggestion and turns into a toothless exercise in the obvious. And one of the worst reviews that I found said, and I quote, an ill-considered, utterly unnecessary remake. So, Ray, was this remake utterly unnecessary?
Not as unnecessary as that reviewer's existence.
Well, maybe the existence of the review. I don't think we want to cause any harm to any reviewers.
No.
So, but yeah. No,
We're
I
pacifists here, folks. It's all in jest.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah. So in talking about some of these specific criticisms of the film, I think one of the first ones is about, one of the first ones that jumped out to me was when people were saying that it was not scary. Right. And so, and that one is one that I think it's going to depend on your familiarity with these type of movies. Right. So is it the scariest movie I've ever seen? No. Right. But sure. I think that it is laden with jump scares. There's lots and lots of jump scares, right? And so I think that horror movies in this genre as a whole have come forward enough, and that we've now seen enough of them that jump scares don't get everybody. Right. A lot of times you because the music starts playing in the background and get that tone and everything where it kind of rises a bit and it's coming. So since you're already now having watched so many other horror movies are ready for it and you're thinking, okay, this jump is going to happen. So when it does, you're not at that surprise because you were expecting it. And so I think that that really is more a criticism of in your experience and maybe the style of the jump scares, like they were true jump scares. It wasn't jump scares with gore, because there was gore in the movie, but that wasn't jump scare, right? Usually when the gore happened, that was it. The movie took its time with it, where you're seeing the wolf actually rip out the guts of a person. The Wolfman, when he bites someone and rips them out and everything, and then it's kind of that long drawn out, gory thing like that, which is gory and uneasy and makes you feel queasy, but it's not scary. And so I think that criticism to me is really, I would view that somewhat as unfair, in that it's not trying to be, the scariest movie you've ever seen, psychologically freaking you out, as much as it's going to produce the elements of the jump scares and then move forward from there with the rest of the story.
Yeah, and something in regards to a movie being scary, generally speaking. Personally, I find that movies that are set in times past, like this one is set in the Victorian era, I find those to be less scary personally, just because I cannot relate to that time period myself. I'm more inclined to be scared by something that I feel like I could be in that situation. Do you know what I mean?
I do. So you're saying you don't feel that you could be chased in the woods with nothing to run but a horse and buggy?
No, it's not that. I mean, yeah. No, I mean, I'm not saying that I can't be scared by such films. I'm just saying that for me, it's a bit harder.
Yes. No, I completely understand, and I feel the same way. There is a lot of times, especially with jump scares, and really jump scares really rely on, you need to, before the jump scare happens, identify with the character that is about to be scared.
Yes.
You need to feel like you're in that same situation. And you're right, when a movie's set in the 1800s, you don't necessarily feel like you're going to be in that situation.
Sure, yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So another criticism of it is that there is nothing new. That it is the same as the original. Right?
I think that's BS and a half.
Yes, it really is. And so I think the problem with movies like this is when they are a faithful remake to the original, they tend to not get as much credit.
Yeah,
because people are critics. I'll lump them all together or separate them out. However you decide to interpret that sentence, people and critics want a remake of the movie classic to surprise you and to fix the story, right? Well, and if you really enjoy this story, especially if you enjoy the original, I mean, the story doesn't really need fixing, right? You add a tweak here and there that makes it a little bit different, but you still want the remake to not go in an entirely foreign area. Right, because if it does, then at that point you're just incorporating a famous name for your completely original idea, right? So and there's plenty of movies like that. I mean, like Miami Vice, right?
Oh yeah,
it had nothing to do with the actual story of the show, right? And so I think that one of the things that this movie does well is it keeps the original story mostly intact, right? It does. You've already outlined some of the major changes that they've done, but if you think about those major changes, it's really just a major change to one or two characters. But beyond that, it keeps the same themes and the same principles and the same idea as the original movie. And it's going to update how it looks, and it's going to update the visual effects. I mean, they won an Oscar for the makeup in this. And so, that they really did a good job of making it visually more modern and appealing, but while still staying true to the original story and not just using the Wolfman as a title to make a whole separate movie.
Right. And that's one of the things that the filmmakers, Joe Johnston in particular, was really looking at in making this movie is what Claude Rains as Sir John Talbot in the 1941 film touched on whenever he said that there's a beast in all of us. One of the main focuses, if not the main focus in this movie, is the primal nature inside of man. And this guy turns into a werewolf, but is he changing into something new, or is it unleashing something that was already within him, kind of thing? And so that was more what they were focusing on there.
Really? I think that honestly that criticism really speaks to some of the strength of the movie and the story, right? So separating it from the movie, the story itself, because I think of this story less as whether or not it's something inside of him that is, the savagery of man about, is it inside of him? Is it being put inside of him? Or, it's put inside of him and it's coming out, or was already there and is it coming out? I look at it much more as Lawrence is a tortured figure. And that sure. He's basically a tortured figure throughout the movie, and that he really, conveys the torture of the early part of seeing his mother's, really what he saw was his mother's murder, and then being told that what he saw was his mother's suicide, being committed to a psychiatric institution at that point, and having to go through the trauma of the treatments there to the point of where he then started to believe that he saw a suicide and not a murder. And that the trauma of him actually then leaving home, right? Leaving home at an early age because he felt that he could not thrive or live or survive in this environment, right? In the environment of his father's home. He goes off and then becomes an actor, and apparently that was moderately successful. And we can, you can break down, while the movie never discusses anything with that, you can break down the ideas about whether or not that's an extension of his trauma, that he makes his life being someone else, as opposed to trying to make his profession being himself, right? And then even when he comes back, there's all the trauma about his wanting to understand what happened to his brother, not being able to relate well to people, and then eventually, the physical trauma of, okay, he's now bitten by a werewolf and he becomes a werewolf, and he wants to be, I think, and even in that, he wants to try to be a better person and try to get beyond that, but every full moon, he's going to turn into a werewolf. And he recognizes that he has no real control or agency over that. And so then he is yet again being victimized, as it turns out, by his father again. Right. And so that it seems to me, it is a movie of where, for me, I got that he was a victim. Right. And he was a victim, and he was suffering and dealing with trauma throughout the whole movie and trying to do with that as best he can. But getting another read from it, to me, is perfectly logical, perfectly reasonable. And that to me is part of the strength of the story, in that I see one thing, I watch the story and I see one thing with these characters, and then you can watch it and see a wholly different thing. And neither opinion, I think, would be wrong.
Yeah. And you know what you were just describing there with these characters, to me, is the reason why this is a successful remake. Remakes often suffer from being too much of a clone of their predecessor.
Yes,
and
very much so.
Perfect example is Gus Van Sant's 1998 remake of Psycho, which was atrocious, an abomination. It's garbage. It should be, all prints should be burned.
Hey, I'm not sure how you feel about this. Could you delve a little bit deeper? Let me know what you really think.
But remakes do tend to have that issue. And a good remake, like you said earlier, takes the core elements of the original, but does something new and relevant to its time that makes it its own unique animal. No pun intended.
Yeah.
One of the big changes here that really works is the father-son dynamic in this film. Now, it's very different from the original, because the original, Larry comes home and he and his father are pretty much buds. And at the end of
That's not the case in this movie.
Right? His father is insane. He's a terrible, terrible manipulative person.
Yes. He is terrible and manipulative for sure. But I think the father, in his own way, has a method to his madness. But it is there's a lot of madness to it. But there's a method. He has an idea about trying to really unleash in himself. Right now, he's the character I see more of that, where the monster is down within him, and unlike his son, who wants to be better, he is more just suppressing his werewolf because he's supposed to.
Sure.
Right. But what he really wants is to be the monster. He wants to unleash that inner monster in himself because he likes how that feels and he likes being that. But ever since after he killed his wife, he recognized that cost was so high that he started to suppress it and to try to lock himself up and hold it back and everything. But in reality, he always wanted to be the werewolf.
Right. And I love the part right before their big showdown. Larry takes Singh's gun, loads it with the silver bullets, and he actually attempts to shoot his father, only the bullets don't fire. And his father reveals, I removed the powder from those years ago. And so right there is really telling of what this character is like, because on the one hand, he murdered the woman that he loved, and he feels like he needs to be locked up during the full moon. But at the same time, he doesn't want this taken away from him either.
Right. I think, though, that part of that, too, could just be, I also looked at it as self-preservation, right?
Well, sure.
And you recognize that he wants to suppress the monster and not let it out, but he doesn't want to die.
Yeah.
Right. So I think he's more like, I'd like to not be a monster, but I'd like to, I'm going to suppress this monster, but, push comes to shove, then I'd want to keep living.
Right. I love the way that family life is portrayed in this movie, because so often there can be hurts that run really deep that never really fully heal. And unlike a lot of movies, even, the original Wolfman, where things with the family are kind of happy fairy tale-ish, this seemed a little bit more realistic in that here's this estranged son coming back to his father's house, and they still don't see eye to eye, and they never really get to the point where they reconcile.
No, this is not the movie if you want to see a familial relationship healed at the end. That does not happen here. Of the last of the main criticisms that are given of this movie, do you find that it was either bland or boring? Right? Were you entertained by the movie, even understanding that the story was similar to the one that you already knew, so you kind of knew where the movie was going to go, but was it still entertaining for you?
I think the reason people find this to be bland and boring is because the story takes its time. It is not overly fast. It's not even fast.
Yeah,
whereas
Fast and Furious, it is not.
Right. Whereas the original movie had a runtime of 70 minutes.
So this one had a runtime of, I think it was about 144 minutes.
Right.
So I will double check that.
Well, no.
It's only an hour and a half. It's not long.
No, this.
Yeah, it's an hour and 43.
Okay.
So it's 103 minutes. Yeah.
Oh, I watched the unrated version.
Oh, okay. Well, how long is the unrated version?
2 hours.
Oh, okay. So then you were, but as you were saying, so then you think that people's problems with the movie was because of its slow pacing?
I think so. And I wouldn't even call it slow pacing. I just think that it's taking the necessary time to tell the story, because one thing that Benicio del Toro in particular does well is he acts. He can act without speaking. He is very good at emoting. You can see a lot in his eyes and in his facial expressions. And there's so much, particularly in the first half of the movie, where you see him alone in the house, basically confronting his past and meeting up with his ghosts again for the first time in forever. There's just a lot of quiet time, let's call it.
No, I agree. And picking up on the acting, which is one of the things that I think is really kind of the strongest part of this. I'm going to start with Emily Blunt as Gwen and her performance in it, and how. And I'll get back to, and I'll circle back around. This will join up to your Benicio del Toro point, because I think he did a great job in this movie. But Emily Blunt's performance is very understated, right?
Oh, yeah.
It's a very understated performance, and it's a nice even. She's like the even straight, for lack of a better term, she's the even straight man throughout the movie, because she's really the only character in the movie that's normal.
Fair,
right?
yes.
Everybody else is crazy in one way or another, right? But the one thing about her performance too, which I thought was interesting in how it ties to Benicio, is that throughout the movie, so she starts out wanting Lawrence to come home because his brother Ben has been killed, and she wants them to know that it's happened and kind of come back for the funeral. Mm-hmm. And then he's driven to find out why. But there's a feeling and a tension throughout the movie that Gwen and Lawrence are going to become romantically involved. Right, and it slowly builds throughout the movie. And you think that you kind of start to look at it like any other movie. You say, oh, okay, well, they've now checked off all the various boxes of, okay, these people are now going to become romantically involved. Now, thankfully, in the movie, they don't. Yeah, they never do, right? And it really, when you watch it and pay attention into Emily Blunt's performance and Gwen as the character, Gwen never flirts with Lawrence, never intimates that she feels anything about him other than, like almost I would love you because you are the brother of the man that I love, right? And at no point that, so there's nothing that she gives off or any signals that she sends off that makes you think that this is going to happen, really. Really what you're reacting to is Benicio del Toro's performance as Lawrence, where Lawrence is acting as if it's going to happen, right? And he is starting to get feelings for the woman that would have been his sister-in-law but was not. And that his performance makes it where what you then are reacting more to his actions of, he feels that these signals are being sent, as opposed to the performance that Emily Blunt's delivering, where there really aren't any. And I think that it's these, and especially in this type of movie, those little nuances of not only the acting and the story and the writing that come together in a really good way that sometimes people could miss or not appreciate because it's not in your face, right? It is kind of, you have to watch it, pay attention, and kind of slow down and enjoy the movie in order to really see that this is what's happening, because it's not being skywritten for you or being done very obviously.
I agree with you, but let me ask you, what did you think of the scene where they're skipping stones? Because for me, I thought that was a key scene for the character of Gwen, and the reason I say that is throughout the film she has been pretty much the grieving would-be widow. Her fiance has been killed. She's trying to find out what happened to him. She's grieving. She's trying to stay sane in this situation. And there's not much to her, as you said. But you have the scene where Larry is skipping stones across the lake and he teaches her how to do it. And in that moment, you see her really relax and unwind for a moment for what seems like the first time in forever. And for the first time, you see a smile on her face and you see her laugh whenever she finally gets the stone to skip. And that, to me, really said a lot, because in this tiny little moment that seems like nothing, you get a moment between these two characters, almost kind of like a meet cute where they first connect.
Yeah, I see what you're saying with that. I think that I viewed that connection, though, to be childlike, right? In that it was the joy and experience you learn from learning how to skip rocks, right? Because I count myself among, and I assume I'm among the many people that learn how to skip rocks as a kid, and I view that as them. The bond that they're having is very much like in the happiness that she's experiencing is kind of like a childlike, where you're discovering a new thing and it's a fun thing to do. Mm-hmm. And I think it creates a bond of friendship or real caring between the two characters. Although I think Gwen, she always struck me as the type of woman, the character Gwen struck me the type of woman where she was going to love and accept Lawrence as much as she could from the beginning, because Lawrence was the brother of the man that she loves, right? And so she was always going to then foster and feel that sense of, familial love and caring towards it. And so I think this moment was, where it was like, almost like as if they were kids and being brother and sister from her perspective, but it was very childlike. And so it was a great scene, and it definitely added to the bond of them. And I think it added somewhat really more on the bonding part for Lawrence in his part to bond to her, because I think that he had been kind of keeping her at arm's length up until that point. And in that scene, it was like, hey, well, okay, I don't know that we're actual people's right, but that we have now this shared experience that we can then, think back about fondly in our relationship, and, it helped me grow to care about you more.
Okay. I can see that. I think I disagree with you a bit, but I can totally see that.
Oh, really? So what part do you disagree? What part do you disagree with?
Well, I liked my version of it better.
Fair enough. The other part of the acting, though, that is something that I guess I want to know what you think of this, because I think you can take us either way.
Okay.
So Anthony Hopkins in this movie as Sir John Talbot basically is chewing up scenery everywhere he goes.
Sure.
Right? He is definitely overacting, but I think it stays with the theme of the movie, right? He is really kind of just kind of overdoing a lot of things. His motivations, the character's motivations, I think, are strange at first to me. At least to me, they were. Like, you didn't understand, like, is he okay with this son? Because he calls him the prodigal son. So,
right.
In the story of the prodigal son, the father really loves and accepts the son who came back, where I don't think in this instance that's really what happened, right? So you think, like, does he really care about his son and really glad to see him back? Is he still bitter about things in the past, or that things in the past that have happened, or what I found? I ultimately thought that I just decided that Sir John Talbot really hates his son, and doesn't want anything really good to happen to him, but then he wants whatever the bad that happens to his son to be inflicted by him.
Sure.
Right. And you'll find that there are multiple moments in this movie where Sir John Talbot does something horrendous to his son, and at the same time where other people could do something horrendous to Lawrence, but Sir John Talbot gets in the way and protects him, and then just protects him, turns around and says, well, I'm going to beat on him. Almost as if, like, nobody gets to be horrible to my son but me, right? Because I hate him. But all of that was really to say that, since we're talking about the acting, I was curious about what your opinion was of the way Anthony Hopkins was acting, because he was a much, while Emily Blunt and Benicio del Toro, and even to a lesser degree Hugo Weaving were providing more subtle performances. I mean, his was very kind of bombastic and over the top. And so that there are some people that thought, some people liked it, some people didn't like it. So I was curious what your opinion was of his acting.
I thought that the way he approached this role was very unique. I thought it was different in that you have this guy who, when you meet him, he seems somewhat welcoming. He seems, likable enough, except that there's just a little bit of venom behind everything that he says and does. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. No, I think the same thing, because, as I stated earlier, I'm on record of saying I think that Sir John Talbot in this movie hates his son.
Right.
Lawrence.
And you know something? I didn't think about this until I watched it this most recent time, but I think that his bitterness towards Larry comes from Larry. My bad. I think his bitterness towards Lawrence comes from Lawrence's leaving to go pursue an acting career. And I say that because John Talbot, the father, kind of reveals to Lawrence that he was upset that Gwen had come and had met Ben and was basically going to be taking Ben away from him. And so that made me think maybe the reason that he's so bitter towards Lawrence is because Lawrence left. Just a thought.
I hadn't thought of that until you mentioned it, but that's a good theory. I'll have to think about that for a bit. I was under the impression he hated him just from the beginning, but that is interesting. Maybe that is what it is. Maybe the father is feeling that he doesn't want to be abandoned by his children. He wants his children to stay with him and stay by his side through everything. And that could be part of the way Sir John is dealing with being this monster, that he feels that he needs them to accept him as the monster, even though it was not his intention to become one, and that he loves being it, but he wants them to accept him anyway. And he's finding that they're not, right? And the movie never really explains why, Sir John killed his wife. I mean, it just says that he became a werewolf and he did it because it's from his perspective with a lack of memory of the event or any real motivations, just knowing that it happened. But, so that maybe, there could be some subtext there, like maybe the wife also didn't accept him and that's why. Or,
well, I don't think,
or what, but
I don't think there was any real motive for him killing her other than he was an out of control werewolf. I mean, a werewolf
very well could be.
A werewolf just kills. It doesn't continue to be the person that he was before the transformation, so to speak.
No, fair enough. So thinking of other things that were good about the movie, I think one of the things that is good about the movie is the makeup and the effects. Now,
yeah, I was just about to
the
ask
thing
about
is, and makeup and effects always has a shelf life. Mm-hmm. And so when watching this movie, you do have to recognize, okay, this movie is now 10 years old, and 10 years in makeup and effects is, 100 these days, right? So it looks good. It's much better than the original, and it does a good job of, what it's trying to portray. I think that the one thing that was, if you are watching it recently and everything, that is that you have to kind of, which I would say with any movie with the makeup or effects, you have to kind of forgive it a bit when it ages, right? Mm-hmm. There are going to be improvements in newer movies that you've seen now that look better than what you're watching at this point, but watching in this older movie. But then at that point, it was great, right? And so they did a really good job of making the werewolves not, I think I actually really appreciated that it looked like it's much more makeup and creature effects, not CGI.
Exactly.
Right. And that they actually look like and so underneath it, when Benicio del Toro and Anthony Hopkins are werewolves, they look like Benicio del Toro and Anthony Hopkins.
Yes.
Right. And you can tell that. The obvious CGI is when his fingers bend the wrong direction and his feet get bigger and everything. That's obviously that's not makeup effects. But they did a really good job as far as portraying this and what those look like visually, while still, staying a bit understated and keeping with the theme, right? They could have gone much bigger. They could have CGI'd him. They could have made it where when he turned into a wolf, he grew in size, because there's been some that done that, so they could make him where he's like the Hulk. So they'd have to CGI the whole thing, or things like that. And so I think that the visuals of this movie really worked to me in the sense that they did a good job of enhancing this understated, and I'm saying understated, which is an odd way to describe the Wolfman, but this understated story and this understated the way it's done enhanced it and not overpowered it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I really, really love the monster design in this movie. Jack Pierce did the original monster design for the Wolfman. Jack Pierce is a legend. He created the monster makeup for the Wolfman, for Frankenstein's monster, for the Mummy, for so much. And as a matter of fact, he was the inspiration for Rick Baker, who did the movie makeup for this iteration of the Wolfman. But I remember, even though I was kind of bitter toward remakes when this initially came out, I remember seeing the look of the monster and just being in awe of how it was equally something new and equally a tribute to the design of Jack Pierce. Because if you look at Benicio's monster and Lon Chaney Jr.'s monster, if you put them both side by side, you can tell the basis is there. They look very similar, except that this one is amped up, so to speak. It's got bigger teeth. It's got darker hair. It looks a little more realistic-ish. I mean, it's a werewolf. Werewolf isn't real.
Right.
But
so you're saying it looks more like the real werewolves you've seen in the past.
Right. And what's interesting is this werewolf was also made with yak hair, like the original was.
Right.
If that means anything to anybody.
Yeah, no, the original with the yak hair they did the makeup on the feet, on his feet and everything to make it where when it grew
everywhere,
grew in quotes in the old movies. Yeah.
But I will say my one big gripe with this movie is the CGI. I hate the CGI in this movie because it just looks so awful. And I could forgive it if it was not for the fact that Rick Baker, who did the monster effects for this movie, he's known for his terrific monster effects. Okay, Ocean, have you ever seen An American Werewolf in London?
I have not.
What's the matter with you?
Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to pause this podcast so I can go show Ocean this movie. But in An American Werewolf in London, it has perhaps the greatest werewolf transformation of all time. It is all practical effects. It looks painful. It looks awful. It is awesome to watch, and it was done by Rick Baker.
So then the CGI you don't like is the transformation, not
all
the
CGI.
Okay, so because the CGI of him running, right, where every now and again he's running and the camera is on his face, as the werewolf, and then he goes from 2 legs to 4, and at that, I mean, that is, I just forgave it because of how old the movie is.
Sure,
but
that one doesn't bother me so much. I think because it's it's blurry, it's action, but like the anytime you see an animal in this movie, with the exception of the dog that's in the house, like you see the bear that the gypsy owns, or you see there's a scene with like a reindeer or an elk or some kind of antlered animal. I don't know what it is. They're clearly CGI. As a matter of fact, I actually read that the gypsy's bear was recycled animation from the Golden Compass.
Okay.
They turned, they just turned the polar bear into a brown bear.
Hey, you got to reduce costs wherever you can.
But the gore, like whenever the werewolf would attack somebody, I would say 75% of the time it was CGI. And it was so annoying because I am a huge fan of practical gore effects.
Okay. So even when so you think that it was CGI, they didn't use, because I didn't notice that as much with the gore. Right, with the gore, I thought that looked more like practical effects to me. But
there were some, and there might have been more CGI gore effects in the unrated version that I watched.
Oh, okay, yeah, no, I saw the regular theatrical release.
Right, so there might have been way more in my version than in yours, but there it is. But that's my one big gripe with this movie is the CGI. But whenever they did do makeup or practical effects, I thought it was great.
Good. Is there anything else that you wanted to discuss about that we've left out discussing about the movie?
Well, this isn't like a really big point or anything, but one thing that I did want to just say real quick that I thought was really cool was Mileva, the gypsy woman, the old gypsy woman. You know who I'm talking about?
Yeah, so the one that saved Lawrence at the beginning of the movie, even though she was another gypsy recommended that she let him die.
Right. Did you catch who played her? Don't look it up. Don't look it up.
I did not catch who played her.
Okay.
I have to.
Don't look it up. I'm going to tell you.
Yeah.
I'm going to tell you.
All right.
Because
who played her?
I never realized it the first time I saw it, and then I watched it this time, and I'm like, oh man, I never realized that was her. That is Geraldine Chaplin, the daughter of Charlie Chaplin.
Oh, okay. Yeah, no, I did not catch that at all.
Apart from being the daughter of Charlie Chaplin, she's a pretty good actress in her own right. She's had her own acting career. So yeah. And then other than Geraldine Chaplin, one other thing that I just wanted to briefly mention is that I thought that the production design for this movie was pretty great. I love that.
It was.
I love the designs of, Talbot Hall, of the crypt, even the village, and just the way that they did the woods and how everything had the fog and the mist. I just thought that it was really, really cool.
Yes, I think they did a good job with all that. The set pieces did set the tone for the rest of the movie. I did not look up beforehand where they shot all of this, but it did with the mists and the weather and everything. It allowed things to be ominous and creepy. Sometimes even when I don't think that was necessarily the intent. Right? It was more the intent of this is just what what England would look like weather-wise this time of year.
Yeah.
And then when putting it in that setting, it then makes it where it makes the setting allows a little bit more of a chill factor to occur throughout the movie. normally you would just force it through, either jump scares or something psychological. I think I'm ready to move on to the filmmaker's goals.
All right. Pretty much, I mean, this one's kind of cut and dried as far as what the filmmaker's goals were. They were remaking a monster movie. And if you wanted to take it a little bit further, like I mentioned before, Joe Johnston, the director. By the way, real quick, are you familiar with Joe Johnston?
I am not. I looked up his credits on IMDb. I was not familiar with much of him before. I know that it had been 6 years. His movie before it was Hidalgo, and it had been that was 6 years before this movie. But then after this, he did direct Captain America: The First Avenger.
Right.
So I like that one.
Do you know but do you know what he's more famous for other than being a director?
I do not.
He is famous for his work on Star Wars as a visual effects artist.
Oh,
he helped design the Millennium Falcon, the X-Wings, the other spaceships, Boba Fett, stuff like that.
Oh, wow. Well, that is clearly going to be one of the most impressive impressive lines on his resume.
But anyway, not to get off track, like I said before, Joe Johnston was really wanting to touch more so on the beast in all of us and the primal nature, the duality of man kind of thing. But in general, again, modern version of a beloved monster movie. Do you think he and the other filmmakers on this film achieved their goal?
I do. You summarized what I think the goal of the movie was, which was to create a modern version of this movie. And so I think they really did achieve that, right? I think that when you are doing a remake, a lot of times less is more. You definitely, I understand that it's very rarely going to be well received that you'd want to make an exact remake, shot for shot from the original movie, right? Mm-hmm. But, just tweak it a little bit so it's a little bit different and there's a little bit fresh and maybe a couple of things here and there if you've seen the original movie that are going to be different. But to still stay in that lane of what that movie, what it meant and what it was for, right? And so I think that I think that they really do achieve that goal insofar as it being a movie that definitely stays true to its roots, pays homage to what it is, and then provides a few other avenues or off ramps, right? So like we've discussed earlier, that I view it more as a character drama about a tortured man and him trying to come to grips with all of the trauma that he experienced throughout his life. Right. And you could look at it as you're looking at the savagery, the inner savagery of man. Right. That the movie, and that's just 2 points of view. I'm sure if we sat down and thought about it long enough, we'd come up with 3 or 4 more. Right.
Sure.
And so then that to me is part of the strength of the movie, in that it keeps the original idea and tweaks it just enough to let you come away with it with different perspectives and different points of view.
Yeah. So that being said, how do you rank it? Rate it, rank it.
Do you want me to go first, or would you like to go first on the ranking?
I asked you first, so you.
Okay, fine.
No.
Fair enough. So you asked first.
You're afraid, aren't you?
I'm sorry.
You're afraid, aren't you?
Oh no, I'm not afraid. I've it's on my flick chart. This movie ranked 243 out of 400. And so out of 400 for me, and so that it was the middle of the road, a little bit below 500. The flick chart said I should recommend it at 2 stars, although to me that's too low.
Sure,
I really view this more as 2.5 stars, and really, while I've been talking about how I like how good the movie is and how well made it is, I think that my number, my review is not a reflection on the movie itself. The movie itself is very well done. If you haven't seen it, you should. Although if you're at this point in the podcast and you haven't seen it, we kind of wrecked it for you. But you can watch it anyway if you want, right? And so, or if you have seen it, watch it again, right? But it's a good movie. What I've come to learn throughout this process, really about myself recently, is I'm not a big fan of monster movies.
Fair enough.
And so so because I'm not a giant fan of monster movies, to me, there's aspects of this movie where it's like I understand and appreciate where it's going. I understand and appreciate what it's doing, and I think it's doing a great job of it. I just recognize that it's outside of what I tend to just enjoy watching. I'm not into the Mummy, the Frankenstein movies, the Wolfman, the Dracula, the old monster movies. I'm just not. I've learned I'm not into them, and it was actually I found it interesting in the process of this podcast. I think I maybe owe you a debt of gratitude where I did not consciously realize I had that bias until I saw this movie, because this was the first movie where I'm watching it and I go, no, I can understand objectively I am watching a good movie, but I still personally am not enjoying it. And I think that is just because I'm not into this genre. So what was your rating?
Well, on my flick chart, it wound up at a 63%. However, I have way more movies on my flick chart that I like than dislike. It's not like a 50-50 kind of thing. Right. So star-wise, I give it 3.5, and I'm so close to giving it 4, but I just can't seem to get quite there. So 3.5 is where I stay on the star rating. I think that as a remake, they made a valiant effort, and I think they pulled off a decent movie, and then some.
I concur. And so then I guess the final evaluation, does this film deserve the bad rap that it gets?
No, son!
Way to keep it succinct.
I try.
Yes, I agree with you. No, it is not. It does not deserve that rap. It is a well acted and a very good update of an old Monster B movie. And so I think that it's definitely worth a watch. If you haven't seen it and you're listening to my voice now, I'm sorry we wrecked it for you, but you should still see it. It's an enjoyable movie. But and if you have seen it before and you think maybe that it wasn't, it wasn't necessarily your cup of tea and think it was that good, you definitely give it another shot. Think about things we've been talking about throughout this podcast, and give it another chance. I think you'll find that it is a much better movie than what you've been hearing about in reviews.
Yeah, we hope we can be persuasive. If not, we do have. I mean, how about never mind.
Exactly. And if you don't agree with us, we'll find you where you live. So,
this has been Silver Linings, part of the Next Reel family of film podcasts on TrueStory.fm. We hope you've enjoyed this episode, and that we may have even inspired you to give this movie a second chance. If you'd like to get more involved with the Next Reel community, visit thenextreel.com/membership. For just $1 a month, you can become a one-reeler and join our online community in our Discord server. And for a few dollars more a month, become a two-reeler supporter and join us for show live streams as we record, early access to shows in your very own personal podcast feed, and access to the super secret member channels in Discord. Plus, you can now support with a single annual donation at either level. Thank you to everyone who's joined us and to all who are checking us out. Your support allows us to keep producing and growing the Next Reel family of podcasts here at TrueStory.fm. See you in the next episode.
I love the conversations that so many of our hosts have had on their shows. Steve and JJ on Trailer Rewind, Ray and Ocean on Silver Linings, even Tommy's short-lived Wait, Hear Me Out.
So many listeners want to make sure they've watched the movie before tuning in to any discussion on our podcasts. Well, the best way to watch the movie is to look it up on our watch page.
Our watch page lists all the movies that we have discussed on all the shows from the Next Reel's family of podcasts, including the one you're listening to right now. It's your one-stop shop for Apple and Amazon links where you can rent or buy the movie.
Trailer Rewind movies like Raw,
The Nice Guys,
The Peanut Butter Falcon,
or Free Fire.
No, Wait, Hear Me Out movies like Josie and the Pussycats or Return of the Living Dead.
Or Silver Linings movies like Repo Men, Daredevil, and The Wolfman.
Plus, by using those links to rent or purchase movies, Apple and Amazon will show us a little bit of love, which allows you to support our family of shows with minimal effort.
It's a great way to support the show and find something to watch.
That's right. Head over to thenextreel.com/watch to pick out your next movie and start watching today.